Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. Folks, today we have a 2022 Lexus LC500, potentially one of my favorite Lexus models. There's so many good things about this Lexus that it makes other car manufacturers kind of losing it. They just don't make cars like this anymore. And in this video, I'm going to share with you why that is, why this thing is special, and why they don't make cars like this anymore. And after the end of this video, if you're shopping for a car in this segment, you're going to realize that this is a total hidden gem. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos if you are a returning subscriber. Well, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's start talking about the LC500 with a technical review, and potentially the most important part. This is an LC500. Lexus has been getting away from that left and right, like the LS500 has a 3.4 or 3.5 liter V6. They're kind of starting, like other manufacturers, to get away from the number after the model name representing the size of the engine. But here it is correct. This is a 5-liter V8, naturally aspirated, no turbo, no supercharger, no nothing, and it makes bundles of power and noise. The coolest thing about this engine is, some people will call it old school. It's an old school V8. It's actually not the case. It does have a lot of technology. That's how it's able, with a 5-liter V8, make this much power. Let's talk about some of these highlights that make this engine a true masterpiece. First, the fuel injection system. This has Toyota or Lexus's D4S system. So this has 8 port injectors and 8 direct injectors. The direct injectors sit underneath the intake manifold, buried down in there, so they go to the cylinder head on the side. Pretty cool design, not on the top. That's actually a better design or a better location for it. It does have 2 high pressure fuel pumps, one for each bank, and everything else. This fuel injection system has been used in many Toyota and Lexus models. Super reliable, super simple, works very good, and the most important thing is it prevents carbon buildup because you have the port injection system washing off the back of the valves. And something very interesting about this engine that a lot of people are not aware of. This engine, actually, the VVTi system, or variable valve timing system, is not an old school system. On the exhaust side, things are old school. It's an oil controlled system, has a little solenoid that activates it. Very simple, just like any other V8. You know, you go into a Tundra or the other truck V8s, it's a similar. But on the intake, it is similar to Toyota's A25A, which is a super high-tech electronically controlled VVTi. The idea is very simple. You have an electric motor, sits right in front. You can see it right in front of the timing cover right there. This splines into the timing gear, and then this motor, electric motor, is always spinning the speed of the camshaft. When you want to advance the timing, this motor speeds up. When you want to retard the timing, this motor slows down relative to the speed of the camshaft. Super ingenious design, works really good, and it gives the computer infinite control. Pretty cool design, and pretty cool to see that on a V8. We're used to see that on a 4-cylinder, but here it is in a glorious V8. And getting more into the nuts and bolts of this engine. This engine has 4 timing chains. That seems like a lot to some, but it is basically Toyota, ever since they switched from the timing belts to chains on their V8s, they have been using 4 timing chain. There's 1 timing chain between one of the cams and the crankshaft on one side, and then on the other side. Then there's a tiny little chain that connects the 2 sprockets for the intake and exhaust on each side. That's a total of 4 chains. Really, they don't have issues with chains in this generation, unlike some of the early ones that had issues with valves dropping, with chain tensioners making noise. This engine actually doesn't have those issues, which is a giant plus. Otherwise, the mechanical construction is very similar to that, to all the UR series engine. By the way, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video. This is a 2UR GSE. And did you know that that G at the designation of Toyota and Lexus engines, G stands for performance. Every time you see G right after the engine name and family, that means it's geared for performance. If you see an F, that means it's geared for fuel economy and emissions. So this is a proper performance engine. And something very interesting about it, see, this generation or family of V8 engines usually have the oil pump on the nose of the crank, part of the front timing cover. Very simple design, works really good, but this one takes things a little bit to the next level. This has a second belt-driven scavenger oil pump. All that oil pump does is, in case you are driving this on the track, which you should because this thing is epic, if you're driving this on the track and you make very fast turns, that single oil pump will not be able to keep oil everywhere in the engine, so that second oil pump will actually help it keep oil flowing everywhere, even when you're driving very fast and making very sharp turns on the track. And lastly, the cooling system of the engine. Pretty old school, pretty traditional cooling system. You have a mechanical belt-driven water pump. You have a traditional thermostat. There's no coolant flow valve or none of that. But one thing that is interesting about the LC, it has two radiators. They're all in the same place, but it just has an auxiliary radiator in case you need that extra cooling. And there is a little valve that sends the coolant to the two radiators accordingly when you need it. In case you're on the track on a hot day and you need that extra cooling, you have an additional radiator for that extra cooling. Moving on to the transmission, it's a 10-speed transmission, direct shift, super compact transmission. Actually, it's a beautiful transmission other than the way it shifts. We'll talk about that later on in the video. There have been a lot of revisions to this transmission in the programming side of things, but it's still a little clunky of a transmission, especially at lower speed. It almost feels like they designed it only to be driven hard on the track, but when you drive it slow, it's a little clunky. We'll cover that a little bit later in the video. The differential, this is again a rear-wheel drive car. We don't have anything else but the differential. It is a Torsen limited slip differential, proper and correct for a car like this. Let's talk about the exterior of the LC500, starting with the front. Now, the LC500 is a truly good-looking car, folks. I love the way this thing looks. It just looks very elegant and classy, and I love the way it looks. Now, the spindle grille here, even though some people dislike it, I like what they did with it. They did something that makes it kind of more subtle, less in your face, because first it's small, because the front of this car kind of is pointy and not huge, but it kind of has a ripple in it. Like you look here, it has a ripple, and it makes it smaller. It makes it just proper. It feels like they really designed this car with the spindle grille in mind. It was not something that was tacked on later. It does have a little bit of that old school spindle grille look because this has been going on since 2018. They really haven't changed much in it. I love the design of the headlights, and it has all this check mark and everything is going. I just love this car, I have to admit. One thing about this, they have this gray trim around, and this gray trim does not change color when you change the color of the car. It stays exactly the same. On some colors it looks good, and some colors it looks off. In this orange it looks okay, but I think if it would have matched, or maybe a different color would have looked nicer, maybe black. But that's just my opinion, but these do not change color with the different exterior colors. And something that is pretty cool about the exterior of the LC500, the materials they used are all pretty cool materials. Let's start with the lesser cool ones. The hood and the fenders are aluminum. The door, many have noted that the whole door is made of this special composite. That's actually not the case. The door shell is made of aluminum, but the door structure is made of a special composite, which is noted by the very cool bolts that say Lexus, Lexus, Lexus on them. When you open the door, you see them, and you see some of that special composite. And optional on the LC500 is a full naked carbon fiber roof. It looks beautiful, and it's super rigid, and it's proper for a car like this. And something that is pretty cool about the exterior, the door handle, it is just flush. You push this a little bit and the door handle pops out and you pull the handle to open it. And if you want to lock it, you just push this and the door locks. Pretty cool design for this car. Now, I will admit that this is not a very practical design for everyday cars, but for a car like this, things like this are really cool. And of course, you have the Lexus logo and the handle is pulled out. This is really nice, folks. Then we move over the back of the LC500, and something I love about it, the taillight. It just doesn't have a color, it almost looks like a mirror. I love it. Usually, you will see taillights like this on prototypes, on non-production cars, you know, and fancy cars in the auto show. But here, we have that same taillight. I wish more and more cars would have taillights like this because it looks super cool. Something else that is super cool is we have an active wing here. Now, this wing, you can manually activate it inside the car, or it automatically deploys up at speeds around 50 miles an hour if you're not in eco mode, and 81 miles an hour if you're in eco mode. Pretty cool, but what is more cool is the trunk. Now, the trunk is not very big in the LC500. It's actually on the tiny side, and that's, if you have a convertible version, it's even worse. But something that is interesting is the material in which this is made out of. You can really see it, that it's a different material. And this is what Lexus is calling it, carbon fiber reinforced plastic. So in the end, it is a fancy plastic with carbon fiber in it. It doesn't have the typical weave of carbon fiber, but you can see that it is something special and very nice to look at. One thing I will say about the trunk is I have not seen this nice material on the trunk, like covers on the inside, in a very long time from Lexus or Toyota. They've been kind of going on the decline of things getting cheaper and cheaper. This does not compromise. Oh, this is so beautiful material. Speaking of beautiful material, let's go on the inside, because that's when things go to the next level when it comes to beautiful and materials. Welcome to the interior of the LC500. Folks, this is where this car truly shines. I mean, the attention to detail here is mind-blowing. This interior doesn't feel like a car interior. It almost feels like the designers were given just a break. Just do whatever you want, go all out. Because everything you touch here is just beautiful. There is very, very little plastic, and even when you do manage to find some plastic here, it is very high quality. And everything here is either aluminum, suede, or leather. There's really nothing creaks, nothing rattles. And on top of that, it's not just, you know, a designer interior and that's it. It has that Lexus attention to detail on the fit finish. I mean, everything fits beautifully and perfectly. I just love it. It's mind-blowing. If you ever get a chance to sit in one of these cars, if you're not, in case you're watching this just for information, if you ever get a chance to sit in one of these cars, you have to take it, because once you sit in this interior, you can't have it escape your mind. The design is beautiful. This is not a simple interior. Usually, many cars lately have been having like simple interiors. There's really not much going on, but this is anything but simple. You have the steering wheel and kind of the gauge right there. The steering wheel is this beautiful, super soft leather. Even the airbag is covered with leather. And then the gauge is an LFA style gauge that moves to the left to the right. You have the typical Lexus, you know, traction control on one side, drive mode change on the other, that you have seen in other models. But then moving from that, you have the screen, which is, yes, it's not touch screen. You only activate it with the Lexus Touch, which we don't really like. But in a car like this, that is hardly a problem, because you will see later in the test drive how this thing sounds, and you'll realize you will rarely use this radio. And then from that, we go into the beautiful clock, and then this design right here on the dash, and the dash just has this multi-layers. I love this interior. It is so classy, so nice. This has the optional suede package, so you have suede on the door, suede headliner, and then a little bit of more suede on top of the gauges. And then in the seats in the middle, I mean, this thing is beautiful. But when you really look with a magnifying glass where the leather goes, I mean, It's very rare in cars, even in the most exotic cars, unless you get into some ridiculously priced cars, that the entire center console all the way to the bottom is covered with leather. The backs of the seats, they're all covered in leather. Even the side of the seat where the seat controls are, I mean, we wouldn't have minded if there was plastic there. I mean, that's an area where nobody really cares about, but even that is covered in leather. The material of the carpet is this old school thick carpet. You just don't see carpet like this in cars anymore, yet the LC500 has it. The door sill is naked carbon fiber, just to remind you that this is not just some grandpa car. This is a proper sports car, because it is, folks. This is something about this car. You sit in this interior and you look at it, it looks like a Gucci bag. But then when you drive it, it has this dual personality where it can be super loud and exciting and fast and handles very well, but with a flip of a button and you just raise your foot off the gas, it just turns into this quiet cruiser that is comfortable, that is nice. The seats are not 100% comfortable. They do have a very big bolster, but they're okay. They're not, you know, you're not going to take a 6 to 8 hour drive in this and be perfectly fine. You're going to want to take breaks, but being in this interior is really an experience, and it's a beautiful interior. Let's drive the LC500, because the drive is where this car truly shines. I mean, once you get past all the goodness here, it truly shines. It's gauge sport mode, manual mode, and let's see what we see. This is where this car is at, folks. This is the beauty of this car. It is such a beautiful interior, and when you want to put it in comfort mode, it just turns into a quiet ride, comfortable. The suspension is not harsh. This is a beautiful place to be. I mean, this is work of art. This is my kind of car, because it is old school quality, not the typical new car stuff. Everything is plastic, but you have all these giant screens everywhere. No, this is true craftsmanship. I mean, everything here is gorgeous, and then you drive it, it has this double personality. One of them is this nice, comfortable cruiser, and the other one is this savage muscle car that actually does handle well. Something about muscle cars, they don't exactly handle well, but this handles really nice. I love it. You cruise around in comfort mode, you hear the engine a little bit, but the car is nice and quiet and comfortable. And just you could drive this across the state, very comfortable, very refined, very happy. But then when things get interesting, you could just do this. Oh, this is beautiful. I love this thing, folks. It is a beautiful car. Beautiful to look at in my book. That is a matter of opinion and taste. Beautiful to sit in, and all this beautiful interior. And then the way it drives, how it has this splits. I just love this car. You know, this is the kind of car that you could look at and enjoy it. You could drive it and enjoy it, and you could really drive it and enjoy it. It's just a beautiful car. I wish we still can have cars like this in the auto world, because cars like this with this much quality of craftsmanship and that drives like that and has a proper V8, proper V8, no turbo, no supercharger, they're disappearing, folks, and this is one of the very last ones that are left, and I love it. Let's talk about some things that I actually do not like about the LC500. No car is perfect, and as beautiful as this thing is, it does have a couple things that are not very nice. The first one is the transmission. If you noticed in the test drive, when I took off with this thing, I was in manual mode. I shifted up. It actually shifted on its own as we were driving, and then I shifted it again and actually went into third gear. The paddle shifters are kind of conservative. They just don't let you completely control. One moment it lets you hit the rev limiter, and the next it just shifts on its own. And then when you drive this thing slow, the transmission is clunky. Now it is leaps and bounds better than the 2018 model. Over the years they kept improving on the transmission programming, but it's still, when you drive it at low speeds, unless you're really driving slow, it just is clunky. It just keeps up, down, and the shifts are not smooth sometimes. If you drive very hard, it's perfect. If you drive really slow, it is okay, but that normal driving, if you would, it is a little bit on the clunky side. And then the other thing is, you remember how I said the interior is gorgeous and beautiful and all the materials, you hardly find any plastic. Well, they did all that, but they forgot one thing that is actually very obvious, and it is completely plastic and very cheapo plastic. The steering column cover. It is basically out of a base model Corolla. I don't understand why they missed it. I mean, you did all this, but you missed the steering column cover. First, the color doesn't match. The entire interior is this beautiful beige color, and here is the steering column cover that is black out of a Corolla and assembly line. And then when you turn the wheel, the screws are right there. There's nothing wrong with that. That works. But in a car like this, when you did all that in the interior, did you really leave that steering column cover? It kind of kills it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if you own one of these and you're watching this video and now you've seen it, I do apologize, because it is kind of an eyesore. So what is the final verdict on the LC500? Folks, if you watch this video this long, it's not a secret. I love this thing. It is very rare that cars do two things that are complete opposite of each other very well. And that's what this Lexus LC500 does. It's almost like it has two personalities. One of them is this track, loud V8 sports car, and it does that super well. But on the opposite side, it is this very comfortable, quiet, smooth cruiser GT car. There's just not a lot of GT cars left. They're all disappearing left and right. And the good ones are really expensive. I mean, this is extremely expensive, but if you compare it to its rivals, it's actually not that expensive in comparison. But the one thing about this, usually in very expensive cars, you drive them, you get in them, and it's like, yeah, I see this is a nice car, but it's too much money. Why is this thing so expensive? 5 seconds into the interior of this Lexus and 5 seconds driving it, you will really realize why this thing is expensive, because it's beautiful. The interior is possibly one of the biggest highlights of this Lexus, and the way it drives, and this sweet, sweet V8, and this kind of dual opposite personalities that it actually does them very, very well, not half and half. Usually cars that drive really nice, like the Toyota Supra we looked at a few weeks ago, it drives really nice, handles super nice, but it's jarring and harsh. This is not that. Which, speaking of the Supra, I kind of wished this would have been the Supra. You know, take that interior, even though I love that interior, but if they would have taken that interior and put a normal interior, maybe tone down the design a little bit, this would have been perfect. They still went with BMW, and the Supra is nice, but it's not Toyota. This would have been a great platform for the Supra. But they didn't go with that, and that's very sad, because this is epic. If you're in the market for a very beautiful GT/sports car, and you look at this, it's just a Lexus, I highly encourage you to stop and go back and look at this, because they really outdid themselves with this car, and I love it. I love it so much, actually, that now I'm considering buying one. I was considering buying a Corolla GR, but this really won my heart, and I do have an old soul, and this thing fits what I love very, very well. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.